Well, good evening. Welcome to Patrick and Friends. Today I am with Adam. Adam, it is a pleasure to have you
Thank
on.
you, Patrick. It's been wonderful to come over here.
So, Adam, how would you define your love for all things pop culture?
I would sit there. I would have to say I love pop culture things. It's really what makes society fun. Pop culture is fantastic in the moment, you know?
Now, with recent developments with, let's say, Disney
Yeah.
buying Fox or Disney buying Marvel or Disney buying Star Wars, like, do you have any viewpoints on these big corporations taking these beloved franchising and kind of doing with them as they will?
Sometimes it's fantastic. Like when Disney acquired Marvel, really breathed life into the whole superhero film genre by creating Iron Man and the subsequent Avengers movies, which have grown to be these incredible series that are a yearly event for everyone. And other times it's rough. You know, the Disney, while they acquire a ton of properties, they don't always treat them with the best love and care that they could.
The man behind the curtain at the Marvel facet is Kevin Feige,
Yeah, I believe so.
and the woman behind the curtain of the Star Wars franchise is Catherine Kennedy.
Yeah.
Oh, so your tones of those are interesting. Why do you think Marvel is successful in the risks that it takes and the formula that it has, and Star Wars is having such a difficult time since The Force Awakens, trying to get the fandom to respond positively overall?
I would have to say, in a very simple term, it's because Marvel is making good movies, and Star Wars is making very divisive movies. To elaborate on that, Marvel has always built upon itself. They started off with Iron Man, and then they moved on to Iron Man 2, which then had hints of Captain America, and then they moved on to Captain America, and they always built upon each movie, adding a little bit more, like they were building towards their grand scheme, and they took their time. Star Wars, at the moment, is trying to cash in very quickly, as evident by the recent Solo movie, which took place 6 months after the very divisive The Last Jedi premiere last December. And yeah.
Do you think that fans are responding to the new franchise fairly?
I think they are.
Okay.
There are some bad outliers out there, and there's always bad people on the internet voicing their opinions a little too loudly that bring down the rest of the arguments. But Star Wars so far has been riddled with a lot of writing problems, a lot of character portrayals. A lot of people feel like original characters such as Luke, Leia, and Han Solo haven't been given a fair shake of the stick when it comes to the new releases. Rather, it feels like to a lot of fans that in some ways the new trilogy is tearing down the legacy.
I sympathize with the community of Star Wars because in my head, I want to get away from the Skywalker saga, and I think that that's what they're trying to do. Why do you think that every time they try to get away from that, i.e. Rogue One, or i.e. even Solo or Last Jedi, that the fandom doesn't react well to it?
It's because of mixed messaging. Because you said, as you said, they're trying to get away from the Skywalker saga, but in reality they aren't. Because very early on into Seven's production, they said that 7, 8, and 9 are going to wrap up the Skywalker legacy. That this would be the end of the Skywalker legacy itself. So fans were expecting a wrap up to the Skywalker legacy, and to kind of have a complete, what they weren't sure how they were going to expand it, because between episodes 1 and 6 they kind of wrapped up everything, so people were worried about what they were going to expand upon. And so far there's a lot of divisiveness, and I think that divisiveness is what is harming Star Wars, is because they can't commit, because every time they try to go into what they wanted to do with the Skywalker legacy, they back away from it and they try to go somewhere else, like with Rogue One and Solo, and it's hurting the Star Wars brand name, because there is no cohesive direction that Disney is taking the Star Wars brand. They're kind of all over the place. On one hand, we have 7 and 8, then we had 7, then we took a left turn and we went with Rogue One, and then we had 8, which is a whole can of worms upon itself, and then now we've done Solo. And realistically, Disney's all over the place, so fans can't really get behind one thing. It's so spread out that no one is united, and everyone's divided, whether they like or they dislike the new direction, because every time they choose a new direction, they take a left turn and go somewhere else.
From an outsider perspective, because I don't really care about Star Wars, from an outsider perspective, it seems like people are responding to the brand more than the movies themselves. You take your episode 1.
Yeah.
There was huge hype behind that.
Yeah.
It was so important to people.
Yeah.
But people were excited about the brand of Star Wars more than they cared about the movie. Because franchises are an event.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about the franchise as an entity versus the movies themselves individually?
I'd have to say I love the franchise, but the movies have left little to want from them. Right now, at the very least, it feels like there is an oversaturation when it comes to the movies.
Mm-hmm.
And thus it makes me less interested in the brand itself.
Out of the 10 that there are, or however many there are, how many do you think they got right?
I would have to say, well, just going off the top of my head, I'd say 4, 5, and 6 were fantastic. 1 was a misstep. 3 was okay. 2 is a 50-50 shot, depending on what you want to talk about when it introduces stuff.
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere.
The whole thing of Star Wars is highly divisive. Fans can never agree on one thing. All they can agree on is that 4, 5, and 6 are good, and then everything else is not so good. And so, you look at Star Wars and you start to wonder, what do the fans really want at times? And I think that Disney's not delivering on what the fans want, and that's just a good, cohesive story.
How do you feel about the fan service in movies? It might come across to some as ham-fisted. In other words, when it's Rogue One and there's Darth Vader in Rogue One, like how do you think fans are responding to that?
Well, Rogue One specifically loves the Darth Vader stuff. You know, they always talk about how fantastic the ending scene is with Darth Vader. Mm-hmm. That is an example of fan service handled right.
You think so?
Yes.
Okay.
But then you have Solo, and not to spoil anything, but there is a point in which you find out how Han Solo got his name, and it is the most cliche thing ever, and you just sit there in the theater and you just go, why did you have to include that? Why can't you just leave my thing alone? Why did you have to go this route? Why couldn't it be done a different way?
How much emphasis should fan service play into a Star Wars movie?
I would say if on a scale to 1 to 10, 10 being the most amount of fan service you can.
Just really quick, just to make it clear. How long would you put R2-D2 and C-3PO? Like how much screen time do you give them? You see what I'm asking?
None.
Okay.
The thing about Star Wars and a thing about movies in general, especially with ones with long legacy, is that fans will find things to love. But the thing is if you constantly pander to them and if you keep reminding them about the things they love, they'll stop to care.
ATSTs! ATSTs!
Let me finish.
Mm-hmm.
Rather, if I was in charge of Star Wars, I would be far less concerned with fan service or cool fan things to be done here and there. I would keep that to a minimum. And rather, I would focus on creating things that fans would love in the future. New things, rather than reusing old jokes and things that they've already seen and heard. Not to say go too far, but I would have to sit here and say that the reason why they keep failing is because they're not doing a good job. Rey has not been a very good protagonist in the last two movies. Even objectively, she's played very minor roles in the grand scheme of things and has not such a great personality. And other characters that they continuously introduce are either very one note or they just don't feel like whole and complete characters.
Do you feel like the J.J. Abrams one was better than any of the prequels?
So you're asking if 7 was better than 1, 2, and 3?
Yes.
Yeah, personally, on an objective, personal basis, I believe Episode 7 was better than the prequels.
Okay, so it's the fourth best one.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
As long as we aren't including any of the spin-offs, because I would honestly rate Rogue One over Episode 7.
really?
Yes.
Who do you think they're doing right in the new saga? Who's a character that you think is, or characters that you think are?
I would have to say Finn and Poe Dameron are the two characters that they're really doing right inside of there. They're both charismatic. They both are great on-screen presences, and at the end of the day, they always make me want more. You know, when Rey is on screen and she just does cool force powers that no one else has ever done before, I just sit there and I go like, why? Like, she is essentially a vehicle and an excuse for them to do cool Jedi stuff. She, while as Poe and Finn, they constantly have a plethora of emotions. They actually fail sometimes, and it's wonderful to watch them try in the grand scheme of things.
Okay. I return for a second to Rogue One.
Sure, go ahead.
Can you name 3 characters from Rogue One?
No, not off the top of my head.
Okay. Can you name 3 characters from the official franchise?
Oh, that's several movies on itself.
So
that I've seen several times before. While I've only seen, I feel like this is a bit unfair, but I would say Luke, Anakin, Leia, Obi-Wan.
Okay. I just wanted to comment on that. Do you think that kind of sort of reflects the quality of the movie?
I do.
Okay.
I think they don't make characters as memorable as they used to.
By used to, are you referring to the original trilogy, or would you also include the prequels?
I would include the prequels as well.
Who in the prequels in particular would you say is a great character?
Jar Jar Binks.
Okay. Actually, okay. I have less of an issue.
He was the true Sith Lord.
I wish they did that.
I wish they had to.
Who else? It's a loaded question.
Honestly, R2-D2 was a good character back in the day. You know, Obi-Wan was good.
Okay.
And that was about it.
Without describing what Obi-Wan looks like or his qualities, how would you describe his personality?
An old man.
Okay. What about him? Like, sincerely, he's an in-depth character that fans love.
Yeah. I think that Obi-Wan's just kind of like the guy who's confident and takes things slow. He knows how to win in the grand scheme of things. He knows what he wants to do, and he's got a handle on his life and things, and thus it doesn't lead him to being childish or outlandish like some of his other co-stars are.
Now, describe for me, as if I have no idea who they are, Queen Amidala.
That's unfair.
Why is it unfair, Adam?
Because it's ridiculous. Queen Amidala is a one-note character that shows up during episode 1 and says some inspirational stuff, and then they go to fight.
Now, a lot of fans are kind of below the popular Darth Maul. Without describing Darth Maul's looks, what could you describe his personality?
No, because he doesn't even really talk.
Why do you think he's so loved?
Well, I would have to say it's because of his numerous appearances in spin-offs such as Star Wars Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels, and which then he's given a plethora of appearances and character dialogue and inspirations.
Okay. For the final thought of the day, where would you like to see Star Wars in 5 to 10 years?
Done.